Indeed, and Brent Health Matters is here. We have interrupted the Drive Time show with Corinne Battar to bring you a very special broadcast today, because this is our monthly panel discussion show where we are talking about important issues that basically affect all of us. My name is Sasha, and I'm going to be hosting the Brent Health Matters conversation this evening, and it is a very interesting one, and it's one that I feel every single person, regardless of your age, needs to know about. Now, if you want to get involved in the conversation which we are talking about this evening, and that is on the topic of dementia, please do get involved via the socials at the Beat 1036 on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Please hit us up and let us know what you think. But this evening, we are going to be talking to a very special panel of people, and I'm going to introduce them because I think it's really important that we understand what everybody on this panel is going to be talking about this evening, because we are talking about dementia. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Sumi. I've got Dr. Sumi on the line now. Dr. Sumi is a GP at Oxgate Gardens Surgery, and she has done quite a few bits and bobs in this industry. She is very well educated. Dr. Sumi, would you mind giving us a very quick brief about who you are and what you do, and a little bit about your history?
So my name's Dr. Masumi Mukherjee. I've worked in Brent now for over 10 years as a GP. I trained in sort of Harrow local areas around Brent. I've been a GP for about 20 years now, and have seen the changes that have come in through the different how we deal with dementia as time has changed. I am currently the Brent Borough Lead for Mental Health, which is also for dementia as well. I am a local GP at the moment. I work in Cricklewood. I work in Park Royal as well. I oversee the local south of the borough, south of Brent, as the clinical director for Brent, for my area. That's overseeing 10 practices that I look after to make sure we're delivering good care. And yeah, that's it. That's me in a nutshell at the moment.
Fantastic. Really, I've got a few questions that I'm going to direct at you very shortly. But before we move on, Fayad, hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for joining us on this panel. Now, you have got experience of dementia in the form of your mother, right? Could you give us a little bit of background of your experience?
Sure. So my elderly mother, who's 76, was diagnosed with vascular dementia at the beginning of last year in February. However, her symptoms of dementia kind of showed up a good 1 or 2 years prior. So we kind of had a feeling that something was going on. And once we kind of, went down the paths of just diagnosing what exactly she had, she was then clinically told that she had vascular dementia. So for the last, I'd say, good 3 years or so, I've been dealing with supporting my mum with her caring needs for obviously dementia, just coping generally on a day-to-day basis. And I'm basically adapting and pivoting to the ever-changing kind of needs of someone who has dementia as well, but at the same time learning about it too, which has been quite a challenge. So yeah.
Yes, no, of course. And we will get into a little bit more about your experience and your story and your kind of connection with dementia as we get through the program. So thank you for that introduction. Now, Danny, hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, hi, Sasha.
Right, now you are the chair of CAD Brent, aren't you?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Yes, so my day job is a CEO at Astor Place, which is a charity in Cricklewood. But my full-time kind of occupation is CAD Brent. That was something we set up back in 2017. And what's really nice about it is its membership is made up of, people from the council, NHS, police, fire brigade, faith communities, but more importantly, people living with dementia and their carers. So it was a gathering of people with a very simple vision, which was to make Brent a dementia-friendly borough. Because at that time, it's fair to say there was nothing in the community to support people living with dementia and their carers. And I can tell you a little bit more later on about what we've actually achieved since then. But it's a really important organisation in changing the conversation about dementia, and more importantly, changing the level of services that our residents need to live well with dementia.
Of course. And like I say, you know, it's really important that we have all of these expertise when we've got a panel like this and we're talking about topics like this, because, you know, our listeners really need to understand, especially in Brent, they need to understand how relevant dementia is to them. I mean, I will get into that in a minute, but just before that, Abhishek, how are you?
I'm all right. Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Now, you are a memory clinic consultant, aren't you?
That's right.
Psychiatrist. Amazing. Can you just give me a little bit of background about what you do?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me around. So I'm the consultant psychiatrist for the memory clinic in Brent. So we cover the whole of Brent, and the service I work for, or my service, is responsible for assessment and diagnosis, of patients in our borough. And we do home visits, and we have a clinic in Kingsbury, and so patients can come over to our clinic, or we visit their homes for assessing patients. And so that's my clinical role basically. And apart from that, I also do some teaching in old age psychiatry for Imperial students, and my research interest is in service provision for dementia patients.
Amazing. How long have you been doing that?
I've been a consultant for the last 1.5 years, and I've worked as a registrar in Kensington, Chelsea, Westminster Memory Clinic as well before this.
Amazing. Thank you again for joining us today. It's really, really important, like I say, that we do have voices from people that are knowledgeable and experienced when it comes to dementia. So thank you. Now, just to our listeners, we are talking about dementia today. It is really, really important. Now, a lot of people think that dementia is something that you've got to deal with, as you get older, which is true. We will get into that. I'm going to speak to Dr. Sumi in a minute just to kind of give us a definition of what dementia is and how it works. But I think for me personally, I think it's quite important that we have this conversation. That's why we do these panel shows. It's important that we have these conversations as younger people, because dementia isn't just something that happens to older people and it just affects older people. This is something that affects our younger people as well, whether you've got grandparents, whether you've got great grandparents, whether you've got elderly parents. This is out to our listeners. When you are coming into contact with dementia, it's because maybe a family member or a close friend or somebody is experiencing it. And it's really important that even if we're not experiencing it ourselves, we understand about it. So maybe we can support our friends or our peers or other people that are going through it, because it's really, really difficult. It is difficult. Me personally, I had a grandparent who had dementia, and just watching her deteriorate. I mean, it was through COVID as well, so it was really, really difficult because we couldn't go and see her, and just watching her deteriorate was quite tough. So it can be hard for everybody that's involved. So that's why I'm really grateful that you are all on this panel today, and it's really important that we do have this conversation. So can I just start with you, Dr. Sumi, just to give us a very clear, simple definition. What is dementia?
So dementia is basically when a person's memory or usual state is they're not functioning at their usual level, or their memory is not working, but it can come into lots of different stages. So some people it's short-term memory, some people it's long-term memory. So there is no one fits all dementia. There's lots and lots, and I think that's really important. There's lots of different types of dementia, but the one that everybody sort of relates to or understands is the fact that there's a deterioration in their cognitive, so their normal behavioural function and their memory, that can be their ability to do certain things that they suddenly can't do as well. Sometimes it's their mobility that kind of goes off a bit as well. Their understanding of things, so having to repeat things, they're not maybe remembering something that you've told them a few minutes ago. When they go shopping, they forget things. It's things like that. So it's a functioning, their usual day-to-day functioning is not as it was. And you notice, so for most people, thankfully, it is a gradual deterioration. And it's noticeable more to family members and to work colleagues, people who see them on a day-to-day basis. So it's not always apparent straight away. There's nothing that you look at someone and say, oh, they've got dementia. It's a very subtle thing, and that's what can make it very to diagnose as well.
Really interesting. I mean, your reception's just a little bit breaking up. So just to clarify, dementia is basically a condition that affects your memory. It could be short-term memory, long-term memory, and it deteriorates over time. You can start to forget things. It can also affect your mobility. Am I correct in that? And is it something that happens?
Yeah, it can affect.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, it's day-to-day function, so mobility, ability to do certain things that they normally would find easy to do. Obviously the big one that everyone thinks of is memory. But it's not the other thing. It's lots of other things related to that, which affects their day-to-day lives. So where they were functioning really well, they're no longer functioning so well.
And so, just to confirm, this is something that happens as you get to older, kind of the elderly type of age. Is that true?
Common in older people. Yeah, absolutely. It's more common in older people. That's where we see it most commonly. But there are younger people with illnesses that have an element of dementia with it. So neurological diseases that have an element of dementia with it, which can affect, which we sometimes don't identify early on because we're so focused on the actual disease. We don't focus on the other side of it. So yeah, it's much bigger than people realise. And
no, of course,
will probably mention that because they see it. So we see it very early on, and we see it as GPs. We see it late stages as well, unfortunately, in the community. So there's lots of sort of grey areas in between.
Yeah, no, of course. And I just want to clarify with you, Dr. Sumi, dementia it's not something that's naturally part of the aging process. Is it? It's to do with, there's kind of like a disease in the brain, isn't there? A neurological disease that causes dementia. Is that, am I right in saying that?
We wouldn't consider it a normal process. There is age-related deterioration in people's normal functioning, but that we wouldn't diagnose as necessarily dementia. But there is, you know, the classic Alzheimer's and all of those are related to quite significant deterioration in various areas, not just memory, like I said, mobility, general functioning. So if it's just memory loss, you know, age-related memory loss is well recognised, that people forget things as they get older, but that in itself is not enough to diagnose dementia.
Okay, and can you just very quickly just clarify, what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's?
So Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. It's a syndrome. So what it is Alzheimer's has various grades of Alzheimer's. We have early stages, late stages of Alzheimer's, but it's one of the types of, so you've got vascular dementia, you've got Alzheimer's dementia. Those are the two big ones that we see in our communities. So Alzheimer's is, it's onset, it's often genetic, so it runs in families. It can be related to, it's a general deterioration in the brain function. And like I said, it's not just memory, it's a decline in all areas of cognitive function. So Abhishek would probably be able to fill you in more on this, because it's much more nuanced than that, and I don't want to step. He's probably looking at me going, "No, say more about this." Because it's quite detailed between Alzheimer's and general dementia. There's quite a lot of difference.
Of course. I mean, Abhishek, would you mind just kind of picking up? Then I do want to go to you, Fayad. Abhishek, would you mind just explaining or just kind of picking up on that? If we're talking about vascular dementia and Alzheimer's, like, could you just kind of give us a little bit more insight into that?
Absolutely. No, whatever, just to pick up on, Sumi's comments. So dementia is the general term we use for any deterioration in memory. There are various types of dementia. So dementia is the umbrella term. And so the most common type is Alzheimer's disease, as it was mentioned. And there's other types of dementias like vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, disease dementia, alcohol-related dementia, and so on. So Alzheimer's is the most common type. So some of the symptoms we see is gradually progressive, memory decline, and some problems with comprehension. There may be subtle changes in personality people may observe, and their ability to make certain decisions are kind of hampered. So it is a progressive condition, unfortunately. So that means as time goes on, it's going to get worse. So the important thing is to diagnose it early and try and put in place, certain measures which can help people.
What are those measures that you put in place?
Yeah. So once we make an early diagnosis, there are three ways in which we tackle the problem. So one is, it's called a biopsychosocial model. So we're looking at biology or the medication aspect. So there are certain medications that can help slow down the progress. So unfortunately, there isn't anything that can reverse the process till now, but there are some medications that can help slow down the progress. Apart from that, there's something called as cognitive stimulation. Cognition means attention, concentration, memory, all of that. It's stimulating the brain, basically. So you're kind of getting active in puzzles, you're doing some crosswords, you're going out, speaking with people, engaging in some structured activities.
Just keeping the brain working.
Exactly, going.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple thing is, if you don't use it, we lose it. So we have to make sure different parts of the brain are active. And the best way to do that is going out, doing, activities. Ashford Place is lovely for that, as Danny will tell later on. And and then we can also offer, some social care support. So social services would also get involved, because unfortunately, towards the severe end of the disease, patients may become more dependent for, washing, dressing, etc. So they may need some extra support. Family may not be able to manage. So social care and carers can help out with that as well.
Okay, and for want of this sounding like a really silly question, does dementia kind of have a different effect on people regardless of their ethnicity? Does ethnicity play a part in that? Does it matter if you're Black or Asian or white? Does that matter when it comes to dementia?
That's a really good question. So in simple terms, people of BME ethnicity are at a higher risk of developing certain types of dementias, generally vascular type. That means vascular means to do with the blood supply. So those kind of dementias are more commonly seen in BME population. And also in terms of getting a diagnosis, generally the BME population, they may approach specialist services a bit later as compared to the white British population. So only in that front I would say there is some inequality. But apart from that, there isn't much in terms of who will get the disease. We still know very little about the dementia as a whole.
Of course, and it must, like you were saying, you mentioned before about having an impact on the family and friends, which is why sometimes you get social care involved. Fayad, can I just quickly come to you? Can you just tell us a little bit about, because you said your mum had vascular dementia, is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened, what the symptoms were, if you don't mind?
Sure,
just kind of talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, so sadly, my elderly father passed away in 2016. So I feel since then, and obviously compounded recently with COVID and with lockdown, we noticed, myself and my siblings, we noticed a change in my mum's behavior, a change in her mood, a change in her motivation. So things where she's, very much not herself. And we felt like, she was functioning perfectly okay. Her mobility roughly two years ago was perfectly fine. But we saw the subtle differences and changes, and we knew, something was up. We felt that it might have been cognitive or something that was mental health related, which is why we started inquiring, going to consultants. I believe we did visit the memory clinic in Kingsbury as well. And when my mum was formally diagnosed with having vascular dementia, that's when we started understanding, okay, what actions need to take place now? What support does she need? What is her care looking like? And myself and my older brother being primary carers, my mum, we kind of took a lot of responsibility in understanding, okay, what can we do to help support my mum the best we can? And going back to Dr. Abhishek's point in regards to training people with dementia from a cognitive point of view, in terms of stimulation, we found that to be something that was very beneficial, and we've seen a big shift. And actually, a big shout out to Danny, because Ashford Place has played a huge and pivotal role both in me and my siblings understanding of what dementia is and how to care for someone with dementia, because I actually attended, myself and my siblings attended a course at Ashford Place, and it was very beneficial as someone who's obviously working at the same time and having to learn about dementia, and then you've got the care responsibilities too. So yeah, just to sum it up, it's mainly been changes in my mum's kind of attitude, her behavior, her mood, and also her kind of willingness and proactiveness to do things. So it's from that we kind of noticed that, yep, something was up.
And you know, a lot of our listeners are younger people. How did this have an effect on you as a person, like you personally, because your life before your mum was diagnosed with dementia must have been very different. How did you adjust? What was that like for you?
So my mum's 76, so I grew up, I'm 32, so we grew up with having kind of aging parents. So with that came, you know, different health issues and stuff that I naturally kind of understood the kind of role of being a carer and supporting. So I didn't kind of go into it at the deep end. I was kind of, you know, used to that element of caregiving. But then to deal with dementia was, yes, very different. And it was a bit of a shock to the system in terms of day-to-day balancing kind of the needs of my mom, supporting her in terms of her requests and what she wants. She's quite dependent on attention and someone being there with her, sitting with her, spending time with her. And I'm working full time. I'm very fortunate that my employer has allowed me to kind of, you know, work from home, so I can balance my caring responsibilities with working as well. But that in itself has caused challenges too.
Yeah,
but also in terms of, like, you know, social life as well, has obviously also not going out as much, which was ensuring my mum's safety first has always been the main priority for me.
Of course. I mean, what would you say to other young people that are kind of in a similar situation and they're just coming into someone close to them having this diagnosis? Is there any advice you'd give them?
Yeah, my advice would just really seek out what benefits and opportunities are available to you as a carer through Brent Carers, which I believe is quite proactive in supporting carers in Brent, but along with someone like speaking to someone today, reaching out to Ashford Place and understanding what services that you can access, along with obviously, you know, speaking to your local GP, or potentially even, you know, looking at accessing, you know, the memory clinic in Brent and seeing, you know, what other support is available, because there's so much support and resources that are available. It's about finding it and seeing what helps you and helps, you know, support your needs.
I love that. Fayed, I am going to come back to you, but I do want to go to Danny. I've heard Ashford Place quite a few times. Danny, could you just talk me through a little bit about the work that's done there?
Sure. Well, we provide, for instance, a dementia cafe, which is a 2-hour slot every week where people living with dementia and their carers are invited to attend. I mean, Fayed kind of referenced this a little bit, but there's stuff around the need to understand dementia. There's stuff around the need for stimulation for people to be able to leave their homes. Because, you know, dementia is a 24/7 experience. It's not a 9 to 5 or a few hours a day. It's a full-time, career-changing, I would say, reality for a lot of people. We have one dementia cafe, but if I can talk about CAD Brent, there's actually 14 dementia cafes now across the borough. And they're based in places like mosques and churches, and we've got one in a GP surgery, which is great, and community centres. So it's an opportunity for carers and people living with dementia just to get out of the house. From my point of view, just have a nice time, good social bit of crack for a change. But it's also a point where they can get the kind of advice, guidance, and information which Fayed was talking about around, you know, training for carers, because carers don't, you know, they haven't grown up thinking I'm going to be a carer. This suddenly comes upon them. And very few people, we're very dementia illiterate in Brent, and this is the same for the whole country. And, you know, information is power. If people understood more about dementia, its progression, its behaviors, the different stages, and more importantly, the benefits and supports that people have got a right to, but they simply don't know about, then life would be a lot easier. So Ashford Place in CAD Brent is about bridging that gap between carers and people living with dementia and what's actually out there. And often our work is about helping people to access that, because just because you say there's X, Y, or Z available, you know, bureaucracy gets in the way sometimes, or red tape. It's not always easy to access these things, but we're here to help people overcome that bureaucracy and get to the support systems that, as I said, they've got a right to. And the other thing we are developing is 2 dementia hubs in Brent. So these are 2 places. One is in Cricket, one is in Barham Library, and there'll be a kind of overall centres for all things dementia. So Shirley, it could be somebody like you who might be just interested in dementia.
Yeah.
You're interested. So you could come along and talk about your interests, and we hopefully can provide information. Or it could be the other extreme, people actually living with dementia or the carers come along and seeking advice and support and guidance. One of the key things at the moment, as you could probably won't be surprised to hear, is access to integrated healthcare. You know, everybody's under pressure. Sumi hasn't got time to, in a busy day, to be spending a lot of time with clients, helping them to understand what dementia is, helping them to understand what's available in the borough. Similarly for Abhishek, he hasn't got time. So we need to invest in more resources to allow us to have more time to help people living with dementia and their carers. So CAD Brent is a force of change. We want to make Brent a dementia-friendly borough. We want to be able to help people outside, and when it happens to people in future, we want them to know exactly where they can get help and support. And as I say, dementia, the diagnosis of dementia is not the end of your life. We want it to be the beginning of a next chapter, but a chapter that is where you get support with planning your life, a chapter where you're informed of what's available, what your rights are. Probably more importantly, a chapter where you feel that you can rely on people like both the doctors here on the panel and other clinicians and other voluntary sector agencies, so that you're not, it's not a them and us. This is working together to help individuals. And if you think about, you know, the current debate in the NHS about the amount of pressure on the A&E hospitals, residential homes, we could reduce a lot of that by helping people upstream. I mean, at the early stages, to get it right upstream, we can help people plan to live well with dementia. And I think we're getting there, but there's a lot of gaps in our area, which we're trying to work together to plug, but there's a long way to go. And I think you might probably agree, particularly with carers. If you look after the carers, you look after the person living with dementia. And I don't think there's enough support for carers, but you know, you'd expect me to say that.
No, of course, 100%. And I mean, you were saying that knowledge is power, and I 100% agree with that. But what would you say to the young people that maybe haven't had anybody close to them who's got dementia? Why do you think it's important that they understand or they know about this? A lot of young people have got an attitude where it's kind of like, well, it doesn't affect me until it affects me. Why do you think it's important that young people are aware of dementia and how it works, and it can even maybe come and get some resources from you and take up the training? Why do you think that's important?
Well, I suppose if any of us have any challenges in life, and they're pretty normal, but if we're informed of the possibilities and how we respond to those challenges, then you know, I'm winning, really. I'm ahead of the game. So it's about making sure that people are literate about dementia, whether it impacts on you or not. We had a lovely scheme just before COVID where we were training, would you believe, bus drivers in Brent.
Okay.
On dementia, because bus drivers, you probably like shopkeepers, they're the people that see, you know, customers every day get on the bus.
They'll come into contact with them, yeah, definitely.
And how many times have you seen somebody get on a bus looking a little bit confused, can't find their Oyster card, not quite sure where they're going? And this went down really well with the bus drivers because they didn't understand either what dementia is. But during the program of training, it was wonderful to see these guys, men and women, drivers, gradually beginning to understand, oh yes, so that's why that person behaved like that. I thought they were drunk or, you know, misbehaving.
Yeah.
Actually, they've got memory problems. and we were training them how to actually to respond. And I don't know if you know this, but bus companies have got these backroom support teams where the bus driver will phone into HQ and say, we've got a person on the bus who's confused, or vice versa. The HQ will say, we've got notice from the police that there's somebody missing. They're walking around in their pajamas in the middle of winter. If they get on your bus, give us a ring, and we'll come and collect that person. So it was a lovely piece of work, but it just showed us the amount of illiteracy that's around. But equally, if we're fully informed, we're part of the young people. I don't wish them any challenges, but if they are better informed and they understand, and more importantly as well, if they know what's available, they're in a much stronger position. And the impact for their loved ones is obviously more positive.
Of course. I mean, it's so interesting that you mentioned the training for bus drivers, because that's something that actually a lot of us wouldn't think about. And it kind of should be compulsory for a lot of sectors that people work in, don't you think? Because, if people, wherever they're working, if you deal with customers and customer service, it should kind of be compulsory that you understand certain signs and you recognize certain symptoms. So maybe that is something that we do need to, as a community, just be pushing out there, that regardless of where you are, if you are in a sector where you're working with customers and doing customer service, you need to be aware of this in case you come into contact. Maybe it should be in the training. That's what I suggest. It should be in the training that most people are doing. If you're working with customers, you should also, you do your health and safety training, you do your risk assessments, you do all of that stuff. Maybe dementia training should be in there, just so you're aware. It is really important.
And it also informs our response to somebody that we think is behaving oddly, because too many times people become aggressive at you and tell you, stop being, a nuisance, or stop drinking or whatever. Training is obviously, and information, changes our own behavior, and it can be more empathetic and supportive.
Of course.
Which is often helpful to the individual, rather than slating them for what you think is a negative reason for their behavior.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. I will come back to you, Danny. It's all really fascinating. But I just want to quickly go to you, Abhishek, because Fayad mentioned the memory clinic, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. Can you tell me a bit about that and what that does?
Absolutely, yes. So the memory clinic, as I said earlier, we do assessments for patients across the borough. So anyone who can come to our clinic, we invite them to clinic, but not everyone can come over. So we do a lot of home visits as well. So, the friendly dementia nurse or clinicians, we would go and do what we call as an assessment process. So what it involves is there is a series of questions, not confrontational in any way. It's more of a conversation, just like what we're having today, and we ask a lot of questions about how the memory is, how things are at the moment, how things were in the past. Are they progressing, or are they still the same? And then we also ask, the carers, or any, it could be the spouse, it could be son, daughter, anyone, and we ask their views as well, because sometimes, as Sumi mentioned earlier, the person themselves may not have the ability to notice there are some problems with me. It's first noticed by a spouse or another family member. So we spend a lot of time with the patient. We spend a lot of time with their carers. We also employ some small questionnaires or tests just to see what the situation is. It gives us a rough guide. After that, we refer some people for a brain scan because a lot of times it's really helpful in understanding what exactly is happening in the brain, whether there's any shrinkage or what's really causing the problem. Once we have all these information, we discuss it in our multidisciplinary team meeting. And when I say multidisciplinary, there are doctors, there are nurses, there are occupational therapists, there are psychologists, and social workers also sometimes are part of these meetings. So we're trying to give a holistic input and support. So it's not just medication, it's a combination of things to help improve their quality of life, basically. And that's our aim. It's not just prescribing medication, it's about making sure there's a tangible change in their lives, really. So yeah, that's our assessment process. It takes a while for this to happen. So the assessment,
how long are we talking?
So the initial assessment, generally it takes just over an hour or an hour and a half. Of course, there'll be we try and give some breaks and gaps and make people at ease. So it does take a while, and sometimes we have to refer them for a brain scan, so they have to wait for the appointment and the reporting of the scan. So that might take a bit longer, for a couple of weeks or so, if not more, depending on the waiting lists. And once we have all this information, we then are in a good position to make safe and accurate diagnosis and support family and the patient by giving some feedback about what the illness is or what dementia means. But obviously, as Danny mentioned, there's limitations to our time and resources. So we try and make sure we also signpost them to appropriate agencies. So, Ashford Place, there's also Alzheimer's UK charity, Dementia UK charities, who have lots of information online, which are very helpful. So in a nutshell, this is our assessment process, basically.
Okay. And just in terms of, because I mean, as you know, we've just come out of a huge pandemic. Did COVID have like a massive impact, or what was the impact that COVID had on this process? Do you think we're getting back to what it should be?
There was a massive impact. So nearly all memory services across the country were shut down as part of the pandemic. So because resources were diverted to other acute problems. So what that has led to is a severe backlog of cases requiring and waiting for an assessment. I can see Sumi is raising a hand, so I'll just finish quickly. So yes, so once we came out of the pandemic briefly, or however we look at it, so there was a waiting list from the time of referral Sumi would send to our team. People were waiting at least 6 months to be seen by our service. That was the number of referrals we were trying to deal with. But we put in place a lot of quality improvement measures, and for the moment we have brought it down to roughly 2 months or so, and we are still pegging away and trying to make sure that we see our patients as soon as possible and meet the national guidelines, really.
And thank you for really trying to push and get everything through, because COVID had like a massive impact on everyone. So thank you for trying to get things back to normal. I don't know if everyone shows their appreciation enough, but I just want to show my appreciation, and obviously here at the Beat London, for the work that you're doing. Sumi, did you want to interject? Did you want to jump in? You're muted, I think. Are you muted? I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, it's gone quiet. I don't know if you're there, Sumi. I'm not sure. We can't hear you. But that's okay. I will come back to you. Try and figure out what's going on with your audio, and then I will come back to you. But yeah, no, that's a really good point that you were making, Abhishek. So thank you for that. I just want to quickly come back to you, Fayad, just very quickly until Sumi gets her audio sorted. What does a day look like for you, just as a carer for someone who has dementia? What's the day in the life for you? I know you said you work as well, but just could you kind of take me through how early do you have to get up? Of course, I understand it's a 24-hour thing, as Danny said. So what does it look like really for you?
So it does really vary day to day, but in general, I need to be up early. I need to ensure my mum's also a falls risk, and I believe that's also linked to her dementia as well in terms of her balance. And I have to make sure that she gets out of bed okay, that she gets to the bathroom okay. I assist her when she walks down the stairs, and when she gets down, I make sure she's sitting down carefully, and then I sort her breakfast out, I sort out her medication, I make sure she's settled, and then I head up and either make myself breakfast or head up and start work. And then I take breaks in between, head back down, check that she's okay, sort out her lunch, sort her medication out, maybe take her for a walk if the weather's nice and dry, because I don't want her to be inactive for most of the day. I want her to be as active as possible. And if I'm not able to engage with her because I'm obviously balancing work at the same time, I want her to try to be as stimulated possible whenever I've got the opportunity to give that to her. So it's about having that balance. And then again, in the evenings, make sure she's at her dinner. If she's going up to the bathroom, watching her walk up the stairs, walking back down again. If she's feeling sleepy, helping her to get to bed. And then, yeah, and then that process just happens more or less every single day. But then with the changes of whether it's her mood or, her, how she's feeling, sometimes she wants to sit down and talk. Sometimes she wants to, if I'm going out in the car, she wants to come along on a car journey because I feel it helps stimulate her in terms of getting out the house. So it's like these various things. So each day is quite committed into understanding, what she needs and, how she's feeling, and then understanding, what else I can kind of provide on top in terms of helping with her stimulation. So yeah, day to day, that's what it is. So it is really, all day long. And if I'm ever need to go into the office or at the house, I need to make sure someone else is at home. Right. I do my best not to leave my mum alone. And that's not because she's a danger upon herself. It's more to the fact that if she has a fall or something happens, she's going to be all alone and there's no one there to support her. So it's about just ensuring that, someone is with her at all times. So like between me and my older siblings, we kind of take turns into ensuring that if one of us are going to be out, that someone is at home with her, or someone at least is, with her that she can, rely on in case she needs them. So, yeah.
Again, I just want to commend you because you are amazing. So yeah, the work you're doing and the fact that you're just there and being that continuous support, I just want to say you are incredible. Just to highlight that. But I do want to talk about this just a little bit more until Sumi kind of gets back. I just want to know, like, because we've got a lot of young listeners, and I just really want to understand, you are a young person yourself. What would you say is the most difficult thing or the most challenging thing about being a carer for your mum?
This meeting is being recorded.
So I'd say the most difficult thing is kind of balancing your work and your life, and sometimes it can be sometimes overwhelming in terms of I do all the cooking, but that's quite lucky because I love to cook. I've been cooking since I was 15, so it's just fortunate. So I do a lot of the cooking, which is a bit strange in one sense, in the sense that my mum was a big cook and I took a lot of my inspiration from her. So for her not to have that motivation to cook or do stuff for herself is not only a shock to myself, but I think a bit of a shock to her, because she also recognizes that she isn't as proactive as she used to be. Right. And so, doing a lot of the cooking, the cleaning, the multitasking, and kind of having your kind of being emotionally there for your loved one and mentally there, but then also trying to still get by day to day. And going back to another point that was raised earlier in regards to why it's important for young people, the reason why I feel it's important is that not only does it demonstrate understanding dementia from to try in terms of being empathetic and actually understanding what goes on, it's just that if you are educated in understanding what dementia is and how it affects different people, it also allows you to behave in a certain way towards people of older generation. And dementia doesn't discriminate; it affects people across the board. So in your everyday life, we are an aging population in the UK, so you are going to come across people of a older age bracket, and if they start acting different or behaving in a certain way, and you've got that knowledge and understanding that these are potential symptoms of dementia, someone might be potentially suffering from that, it allows you to kind of be more accommodating to them, or whether it's someone outside or whether it's even a neighbor. Having that knowledge base that Ashwood Place would offer is very, very beneficial to a young person on that basis. So yeah.
Of course, and with your mum, I hope you don't mind me asking, is it a short-term memory or a long-term memory that's affected, or is it both? Like which parts of her memory are affected?
So it's quite interesting. It's a bit of both, but less so long-term, more short-term in the sense that she'll forget conversations, or she'll forget where she's gone. So say we're taking her to a hospital appointment. Oh, that's one thing I've probably missed out, which is a big chunk. A lot of my time is taken up taking her to hospital appointments, and that's something I need to accommodate during the day as well, during work hours sometimes. So that's kind of a big element that you kind of sometimes need to kind of take on board. But in terms of my mom's memory, it is more short term in terms of her forgetting where she's gone, what she's done. In terms of long term, she does remember stuff, but we're going back, when she was in her teens or when she was in her early 20s. So it's quite strange in the sense that she would remember really, really, quite long memories, but then on the short term, she would forget what she did yesterday or what she might have been. So it's challenging at times because would say that you've done this, you've done that, and she would argue and say no, I haven't. And it's just about working with her and supporting and not feeling, not putting pressure on someone, making them feel silly for forgetting. It's about being as accommodating and understanding as possible. And again, that comes back to being empathetic. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. I mean, I try to upskill myself and educate myself on quite a few different topics, regardless if they affect me directly or not. And I have seen some documentaries and I have seen some case studies of, you know, some older people who, you know, they forget their children's names, they forget really kind of important details, if you like, you know, grandchildren, things like that, and that can be quite tough for some of the people in these programs that I've watched. So you know, it's really complex. I think that's one thing I've learned, that, you know, dementia is really complex and it's on a case-by-case basis. Although there are kind of general symptoms across the board, it affects people really, really differently, and I think that's why it's a little bit difficult for people to fully understand. I'm sure Abhishek would agree with me, but that's why it's really difficult for people to understand, because it's so complex. But if we can, as you were saying, if we can really generally just kind of understand the main principles of dementia, then we can all help each other. You know, we are a community, and we do need to support each other, and we do need to recognize when someone is going through something that might not be what they're used to. Dr. Sumi, are you back? Can you hear me? Are you there?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Look at that.
I don't know what happened. I apologise.
That's okay. No worries.
Don't get on very.
No worries at all. Did you want to build on what Abhishek was saying?
Yeah, so it's a bit of everything really. So the GP's role in this is to refer to the memory clinic. So usually most of us will do the preliminary test before we send to Abhishek's clinic to speed things up in the clinic. So we try to get an MRI scan before we send. We try to get all the bloods done. And we try to do that within 3 months. And we do a basic memory test. Your GP surgery usually will do either a GP cog test or a mini mental state test, which we then attach to the referral, so that once they get to memory clinic, hopefully it makes Abhishek's team's life a little easier, in that they don't have to request a load of bloods, and which just delays things, so that they can get onto the more nuanced tests and the more complex stuff. The other thing that your GP surgery can do, which I don't know if you had this when you were going through it as well, is that we have social prescribers now based at most practices, and those people are people who know about what benefits you're entitled to, what services you can access. So it has helped GP surgeries a lot to signpost better for social care. So they feel met much more with social care, what you know, and for carers, because as Fayad has really brilliantly said, it isn't just one person that's affected by the dementia, it's the whole family. You know, Fayad can't work as much as he would normally work. You know, it's affecting his work, it's affecting that affects his family as well, right? His kids and his wife and so on. So it isn't just the person at the center of it, the patient. It's and that's where your GP comes in, where what we're doing in Brent is working closely with Abhishek and Danny to establish these hubs to get more support. People like Fayad are really important to this service because they're what we call lived-in experiences.
Of course, yeah.
They know what we're talking about, and they're so valuable for other patients to hear that voice. Because, you know, we know it medically, but it's not the same as living with it. And so the more we can do these kind of things, so thank you so much for doing this. This is exactly what we need. Is to tell people that there is support there is help there, you're not alone. Come to your GP. I know people think we're not accessible, but we are. Honestly, we're doing more and more appointments than we've ever done before. At my practice, no one is turned away. We will do your blood test, we will get you seen by the memory clinic, who you know, so you know, please don't suffer in silence. There's a lot of support there for. If you think your loved one needs help, come and see one of us and we will help you. So that's the message I really want to get out.
No, of course, and that's vital. That's really important. I mean, what would you say, Dr. Sumi, is, or when would you say somebody should come to you? Is it after the first couple of times when you realise that actually, do you know what, maybe your memory is going a little bit? I mean, when do you go to the doctor? When do you go to the GP?
So frequently when I see people, it's when they've had a near miss. So they've been lost and they couldn't find their way home, or they've left the oven on. That's the biggest one. They've left the cooker on and they've walked and someone's found that the cooker's on. Or they've just, like Fayed was saying, they've become more confused. They're forgetting things.
Yeah.
They're going to the shops and they've forgotten where they went. You know, so it's things like that. But if you're worried at all, there are tests. And there are we do dementia screening now. There's dementia screening tests, which all GP surgeries will do for people of certain ages and people where there's a risk of it. So if you've got, for example, diabetes or cardiovascular, so heart issues, one of the things we do as part of the tests for those routinely is a dementia
screening. Okay.
So you can ask your GP for a dementia screen.
Right.
It's part of the NHS health screening, so we're very happy to do that. We don't do all the tests, so we don't necessarily do an MRI scan on everyone, but we can do the memory check and we can do the basic blood tests and things like that on anybody. And actually it's good practice to do it for everyone over the age of 65, I think, because it gives you you often pick up other things that you didn't know were there. So it's health checks are really important, and in Brent, not enough people come forward for them. So, you know, that's really important as well.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you for kind of going into that and explaining a little bit. Danny, can we just talk very quickly just about the community? I mean, what needs to be done? I know you're doing so much work with Cadbury and the Ashford place, but I mean, what needs to be done from our community to really, I know you said we need to kind of make ourselves a little bit more aware, but is there anything else that the community needs to do to really just kind of help this and really get this message across from a community perspective?
Well, I think the community in Brent have been tremendous, really, in the last 5 or 6 years, in relation to, for instance, the dementia cafes. They're mostly run by volunteers. So I think there's a huge willingness from local people to help. They just need some guidance, some advice on how best to do that for their local people. We're very conscious that, you know, there should be local services for local people by local people where that can happen. But I mean, you're aware that Brent is hugely diverse in terms of its communities, and there are different views from different communities about what dementia is. So personally, I would like to have a common understanding of what dementia is and what to expect and how to respond. So that's education is still one of our big aims, and we do a lot of dementia friends training in businesses, in local authority, in community groups. So that's really important. In order to mobilize people in the community, residents, sorry to say this again, but just need a little bit of investment to kickstart that energy and I believe enthusiasm by local people to do something, and that takes time and energy to make that happen. So I would, you know, respectfully suggest to local authority and NHS to put more investment into the community, because the community will do the job for you. We've got people like Fayed who are unpaid carers. These are heroes that are doing what they're doing without getting any money for it. And I'm not saying that they want money, but they're doing a huge service for the NHS already.
Yeah.
So invest in our local communities, because that's where the natural resources, as I call them, and energy and enthusiasm is to look after each other, to look after our own local communities.
No, of course. I mean, are there any kind of local community fundraisers or events where people can kind of donate, or is there anything like that happening at all?
I think our funding comes mainly from local authorities, trusts and foundations, big lottery. There are some local fundraisers that are always working to support us, but you know, we need a reasonable amount of money to kickstart, as I said, to mobilize a community-wide effort to improve the lives of people living with dementia, and equally importantly, to support carers. So the care training program that I referenced earlier on it's a really fabulous piece of work, but that's done by an external agency, and they're doing it for free. That's, you know,
Wow.
It's not all about money. It's about people contributing their time and their expertise for the benefit of the wider community. So
100%.
Not a clear answer for that, but we just keep plugging away.
We'll just keep going, yeah. We just keep going. I mean, this has been such an interesting conversation, and there's so much more to this. So just before we go, because we're almost approaching 7 o'clock, very quickly, Danny, and I will come to the rest of you as well, but Danny, are there any resources that you would recommend that our listeners can kind of look at, and if they want to upskill themselves or know more, we will put them on our website, but is there anything or one piece of advice or any recommendation that you, closing thoughts that you could leave us with?
Find your local dementia cafe, because that's the source of, I'm sure Fire will agree, as much of support and information that you really need to carry on as a carer and to support your person. So dementia cafes, that's the starting point.
Dementia cafes. Thank you so much, Danny. Abhishek, is there one closing thought that you could leave us with just before we head off?
Yes, there are lots of resources online as well, Alzheimer's Society and Dementia UK. So it's the onus is upon us to educate ourselves, to try and spot problems early in our families, in our friends, and then approach GP and get the whole process started ASAP.
Amazing. Thank you, Abhishek. Dr. Sumi, is there anything that you would say, just a very quick closing thought?
So this Friday, between 11 and 3, there's the Great Mental Health Day at Willesden Sports Centre. It's a free event for people to come along, and there's lots of information about lots of different things to do with mental health, but including dementia. Ashford Place representatives going to be there as well. Fantastic. So if people want to come along, that's this Friday. So
this Friday, and remind me of where you said it was?
Willesden Sports Centre, 11 till 3.
Fantastic, thank you. And Fayad, any closing thoughts just before we head out very quickly?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if there's anyone out there who, especially a young person who feels a family member or someone they know that's close to them, or even someone in their local community who are showing signs or symptoms, I know there's sometimes a taboo about talking about dementia, but it's best just to at least recommend that person to be seen, to be checked by their GP, by the memory clinic, and to access their services, because it's better that you do get diagnosed and actually supported earlier on than for it to progress and for whoever has it to suffer. So yeah, it's best to kind of do things as early as possible, as both Abhishek and Dr. Musumi has mentioned. But yeah,
amazing. Thank you so much, and thank you all for getting involved in this panel discussion. It's really important that we have these conversations. We will here at the Beat London keep the conversation going, and if you are listening and you do want to learn more, we will put the resources up on the website, of course. But just remember, if you want to get involved in the conversation as well, please get in touch with us at the Beat 103.6 FM on the socials, and kind of just let us know your thoughts. It's been a really interesting conversation, so thank you again, Danny, Abhishek, Fayad and Dr. Sumi for getting involved. Really appreciate your time. This has been the Brent Health Matters panel show in conjunction with Brent Council here at the Beat London 103.6 FM, and we have been talking about dementia. Please upskill yourself, educate yourself and learn as much as you can, because the more that we know as a community about dementia, the more we can do to help support everybody else. The time on the clock is now 7, and I am going to hand over to Miss Bex from 7 till 9 p.m. because of course she is going to bring you some Afro beats.